Order. The House is resumed. In accordance with the lead of the House comes now to questions for oral answer. And the first question is in the name of the Leader of the Opposition, David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, does he stand by all his statements and have confidence in the statements of all his ministers?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes, I stand by all my statements, and while I have confidence in all my ministers, I do not have specific knowledge of all of their statements or the context in which they were given over the last 4.5 years of this government.
Supplementary question. David Shearer.
Does he agree with his Minister of Finance and Minister of Energy, who both said that New Zealanders are not paying too much for their electricity?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, yes, in the context in which they made those statements.
Supplementary question. David Shearer.
Does he think that electricity prices are too high?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I certainly thought they'd gone up way too much under a Labour government, and I often hear Labour members privately talking of the shame of when they went up 72% under a Labour government.
Order. Order. It's a point of order. It will be heard in silence. The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, while the question sought an opinion, it was a straight, non-political question asking the Prime Minister his view on current electricity prices. It did not ask for historical explanation.
Order. No, I don't think that's correct on this occasion. The question was, does he think electricity prices are too high? It wasn't qualified as to whether it's current prices or whether it's past prices. Supplementary question. David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Order.
Does he think that current electricity prices today are too high?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, they are slightly less than the current OECD average. Some of the cost increases that have occurred in the last 4.5 years have been in relation to transmission increases. What I do know is that an ETS that Labour and the Greens would put on the average consumer would add $500 per household a year. I know that Stalin-type nationalisation of power companies would be a disgrace.
Point of order. Order.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Order. Point of order.
That was a pretty straight question that didn't need a political comment at the end.
And that is true. It was answered earlier. It did not need the latter part. Will the member now continue with his supplementary question?
So, does he think New Zealanders are paying a fair price for their electricity today?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I think that they are paying a price which is cognizant and fair in relation to the environment we find ourselves in, having to invest in infrastructure. But as I say, given they've gone up half the amount they did under Labour, what I mainly find is New Zealanders who are outraged with the way Labour ran the economy and are disgusted with the economic management that this government had to inherit.
Order.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, David Shearer.
In light of his comment about the Transpower and upgrades, why has his government insisted that Transpower pay $472 million in dividends over the last 2 years rather than invest them in upgrades to our system?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I don't have all the details on the dividend flow. You could put that down to the Minister of SOE. But I do know that they've spent about $3 billion in terms of upgrades of the national grid. And Mr Speaker, where I find myself a bit confused is that the Labour Party went on that the mixed ownership model was terrible.
Order. And the Prime Minister can resume his seat as well. Are there further supplementaries?
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, David
What does the
Shearer.
Prime Minister say to the thousands of Genesis customers who, as a result of that decision to take the dividends rather than invest them in the national grid, are now paying for the upgrades to that grid through higher power prices?
Order. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I don't accept that assertion. I go back to the point I was making, which is I have seen statements that actually the government should be taking more dividends, not less dividends, and those statements came from David Shearer.
Are you done?
Question number 2, Metiria Co-Leader-Green.
Supplementary, sir.
Oh, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Metiria Co-Leader-Green.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Prime Minister stand by his statement, quote, "The government has been very transparent about its dealings with Sky City," end quote?
Order, can I just clarify? The member just called to take a supplementary question and has now moved, as far as I can see, immediately to question number 2.
Speaking to the point of order, no, sir. Question number 2 is to the Minister of Economic Development and ask him about that statement.
So
Mine
it's a
is
supplementary question.
To question 1.
Can I hear the supplementary question again, please?
Does the Prime Minister stand by his statement, quote, "The government has been very transparent about its dealings with Sky City"?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, but in the context I would have made it.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question. Order. Supplementary question, Metiria Co-Leader-Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why has his government refused to release advice on the social harms associated with this deal until after it is signed?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have those details, but if you put it down to the Minister, I'm sure he'll answer that for you.
Point of order. Supplementary, sir.
Supplementary question, Metiria Co-Leader-Green.
Is the Prime Minister refusing to release information on the social harms from this deal because he knows that it will increase the opposition to the deal by Aucklanders after 61% have said that they oppose it and the Auckland Council voted against it?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaking to the best of my knowledge, my office is not refusing to release it, but if you put the question down to the Minister, I'm sure he'll answer that for you.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Co-Leader-Green.
Does the Prime Minister believe that the costs of the social harm of the deal is a relevant consideration for Parliament when deciding on whether to support gambling law changes that he has promised will be part of this dirty deal?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have the details of that with me, so I can't answer that question.
Order. Supplementary question.
Point of order, sir.
A point of order, Metiria Co-Leader-Green.
I asked the Prime Minister whether he believed that these issues were a relevant consideration, not to provide specific information. He does have the ability to answer that question.
The member was very lucky to have the question left in order, particularly with the qualification she added to the end of it. Does she have further supplementaries?
Yes, sir. Supplementary question. Will the Prime Minister agree to allow a personal vote on any changes to relax gambling law in Sky City's favour so that MPs can vote with a conscience or with their consciences on this dirty deal?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no, that's not my intention.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Metiria Co-Leader-Green.
So when the Prime Minister told this House that his government was being, quote, very transparent about its dealings with Sky City, was he deliberately lying to us?
Order. Order. That question is out of order. Question number 2, Metiria Co-Leader-Green.
Point of order, sir.
Point of order, Metiria Co-Leader-Green.
Thank you, sir. I refer you to Speaker's Rulings 151/5 of Gray and